Alright guys, BLM here back with a new video, and in this video, we're back talking about Survivor 50. We're again doing another impromptu update on my thoughts on Survivor 50, because obviously we very recently got new news. Official news from Survivor 50, where this weekend, there was an event in New York for the premiere of Survivor 48, and during which, Jeff Probst decided to reveal more info about Survivor 50, including its theme, how the fans are going to affect that theme, and also more talk about their general philosophy of the season, to where, again, I felt like it was worth doing a video here to talk about that, plus also, again, my thoughts on more of the recent rumors around what is going on at the season. Because first up, again, let's talk about the official news, the stuff that has come out from this New York event. First up, the name of the season, Survivor 50, in the hands of the fans. What a weird name. I'll say, I do feel kind of vindicated in the fact that I've been saying for a while, I do not think that Survivor 50 will have a casting theme. I do not think it would be, again, a second chance or a old era versus new era, which I think were the more likely themes to be utilized. But again, I did not think that they were going to go that route. I thought they were going to go a more general returnee season, and that is what we're getting at this point. Again, they are going for returnees that Jeff himself has said spread across all the eras, which again, I think makes a lot of sense. But again, I did not expect them to go in on a different type of theme here, where again, the theme, in the hands of the fans, which again, not a great name, kind of wordy, but this being a season that most of the production decisions will be determined by America, which is interesting. I think this is a very fascinating theme to utilize for Survivor 50, something again I think is great all around. And I know there's a lot of skepticism that's going to be like production is just going to pick whatever they want anyway, and our voices won't really matter. And again, could there be that? Yeah, obviously. But also, I feel like the fact that they're even bothering to do this is something to be commended. Again, the fact that I think they truly want this to be a season that the fans are genuinely excited about, I think it's something that, again, is exciting to see here, especially considering I feel like a lot of the recent rumors we've been hearing are things that kind of align with that as well. So again, I think production is genuinely trying here to make a season that fans want. And again, I think that is something that is very rare from not just Survivor, but really any other reality show. As much as you can criticize Jeff for his production decisions in recent years, he is someone that genuinely cares about the show and someone that is doing what he thinks is best for a show. And while I disagree with a lot of his philosophy around the show, again, he does genuinely care. And I think this is something that very much shows that. But also along with the title, we also got the release of the logo, which looks bad. Again, obviously I'm not someone to talk about people's graphic design. Still, like, this is a laughable logo. This is literally something that I could put together. This is something that has them literally just taking the background of the Borneo logo and then plopping a 50 on front of it and changing out Outplay Outlast to in the hands of the fans. Again, this is like such a laughable logo. Like, this feels like something that would just be posted on Reddit. This does not feel like a professionally made logo, but supposedly it is the real logo. This is really what we're running with. Now, again, I do like the fact that it is utilizing the Borneo logo. I think that is the right idea. Again, to take the first ever logo and then spruce it up for the new era is, again, I think a really cool idea. And I think that is in the right direction. I think the fact that they, again, just put a 50 on it, though, is so funny. And again, I do think this logo looks kind of bad, but to be fair, it doesn't really play a factor into much. But then let's talk about the actual things that we're going to be voting on. And obviously, if you do not know, the voting process will start literally during the premiere of Survivor 48, and there are going to be multiple rounds of voting. We know what the first round is, and I think it's implied we're going to get these weekly, considering the fact that we know that they're going to be like announcing this during the episodes. Like, it does feel like we might be getting these weekly, which again feels like a lot of choices, especially if we're getting 4 a week. But again, I think it'll be cool. Now, as for the choices that we know we're getting in this first round, we know we're getting to choose the tribe colors, which I think is a cool little thing. It's something that doesn't really affect much, and I don't know if they're going to allow us to pick just any color or give us like a set combination of colors. And my personal wish list would be to utilize pink, which again, we don't really see that much in Survivor, and also white, which I don't believe we've ever seen in Survivor US. And at that point, I think you guys will just go all out and pick baby blue as well, because why not? But again, I do think this is a cool idea. Obviously, it doesn't really affect much, but again, just a little nice touch added to the season. Also, we're going to be determining if there is rice or no rice, which I really don't care about. I don't know why anyone really cares about. So again, I personally would vote rice, as again, I just think you might as well give them food and allow them to play the game more optimally, having to not be starving out there. Yeah, again, Brooks just seems to have a different idea of that. And to be fair, I would expect the public to vote for no rice, considering I do feel like a lot of the general public is talking about how, oh, it's not not as hard as it used to be. And I think a lot of the votes will kind of go that way. And straight up, again, this is something we got to talk about. I 100% expect the casuals to have full control over these votes. Again, this is not going to be a situation where the superfan community has much say. Through that, I think we're set up to have some pretty disappointing results from at least my point of view. I don't think a lot of these votes are going to work out the way that I personally want them to, and I think that's going to be probably a bad sign for production for down the road, considering they're going to now look at this and say, oh, no one wants this anyway. But to be fair, I don't think the rice or no rice debate is really much of one. The one that we are going to get to, though, forced fire making. And I'm genuinely just shocked to begin with that Jeff is willing to let go of forced fire making right now. Again, obviously Jeff is somebody that has very much defended forced fire making, and I think from what they want out of forced fire making, I think they've got it. Again, forced fire making is a twist that is there to give another opportunity to these bigger players who stay in the game. Well, also I know the criticism is that forced fire making makes it so these bigger threats go out earlier, but also considering the amount of idols and other wonky advantages in play, people can sneak their way to 4 and be given this opportunity to where, again, I think forced fire making for what they want out of it is effective. Again, I don't think it should be there to begin with, but again, we're going to get a vote here. Yes or no on forced fire making? Obviously, again, you should know my stance. Obviously, I think forced fire making should be gone entirely. Mind you, I actually am not as anti-forced fire making as I used to be. We'll talk about, but I think there's a certain other thing I would rather have more than getting rid of forced fire making, but still, I sadly do think we're in a spot where I would be actually kind of surprised if forced fire making does get shut down. I do think we're in a world where I just think the casuals do like fire making challenges, and I think they're in a spot where they don't really see the issue with forced fire making. And while obviously there's going to be some for sure, I do think a good majority of the casual audience is pro forced fire making. Well, also, you see nowadays, there's people in the superfan community that love forced fire making. Again, I simply do not think that the majority is there to get rid of forced fire making, sadly, to where, again, I am expecting it to get voted through, though obviously I'm hoping it doesn't. And the final choice that we know as of right now is really just a give me, and that is a live reunion or after show, where, come on, obviously we're getting a live reunion, and obviously they know this as well, and that brings me to another topic. I think a lot of these choices that we're going to be getting are things that obviously they know what the result is going to be. Again, this is something that a lot of these choices are kind of like fake choices, where I think they already knew that they wanted to do a live reunion for 50, though obviously now are trying to make it seem like, oh, the fans are the reason it's happening, when it's like, no, you were probably just going to do it anyway. But again, it's exciting that we're getting a live reunion for 50. I think this is, again, the one that I'm the most locked in on. I would see no way that we're not getting a live reunion. I think every side is supporting a live reunion. So again, we're getting a live reunion for 50. So at least that's cool. But beyond those initial choices, again, we know that there's going to be more rounds following this. To which I think you can question, like, what are these choices going to be? And we already know that they leaked that there's going to be a choice of idols or no idols, which, why are you voting for no idols? Again, I think that's really dumb. Mind you, I do think an interesting aspect of all this is the fact that the players themselves actually are not going to know what the results of these polls are. They're going to know that these polls existed, but the results are things that they're not going to know about. And I actually think that's a very interesting dynamic to add to 50 here. Again, the fact that people are not going to know if there's idols or not. People are not going to know if there's forced fire making or not. And I think that actually does a pretty effective job at, like, countering some of the downsides. Mind you, again, I still think with idols, it's like, why would you not want idols? I think that's really dumb. And to be fair, I would expect idols to get voted through anyway. But again, if we're going beyond that to advantages, again, I think there's a lot of reasons to get rid of advantages as a whole. But like, I think when we're talking about specifically idols, I think it's just kind of dumb to get rid of them. Considering looking at like the previous returnee seasons, again, some of the biggest moments in the history of the show happened because of idol plays. Again, the double idol play, Tyson's boot, and here's the villains, Kelly Wentworth's idol play, Sandra getting taken out by Denise. Again, all these things are based around idol plays. I think the concept that people want to get rid of idol plays for a big landmark returnee season is so stupid. Again, I think 51 beyond, again, maybe you could try that out. I think for 50, it's a ridiculous concept. But also beyond that, again, I would expect swap or no swap to be a question. I would expect 2 or 3 tribes to be a question, which I think is something that, again, we'll probably get 2 tribes again. So at least that's kind of cool. I will say, though, a ramification of that I'm a bit worried about is the fact that because that's a potential question, you would think the cast would have to accommodate for both. And I think that is a worrying prospect, considering Jeff himself had said at the event that he's worried about cast size and they can really only have like 18 to 20 people. And I think him making a statement like that and the concept of there being a potential vote for a 2-tribe or 3-tribe season makes me think it's probably going to be 18 people. As, again, you can't do a 3-tribe season with 20 people unless you add another twist on top of that. Well, also, you can't really do, like, 21 people either, as it doesn't fit for 2 tribes unless you do, like, an XL island. Where, and I think with the way he's talking, I think it seems like we're getting an 18-person season, which I think is a bit underwhelming considering how many people there are to bring back. Though I will say, the sense that you definitely do get from all this is the fact that Jeff himself is very excited for this season. And this is something I've been saying for a while too, is that while I never expected a returning season until 50, I do see a world where Jeff gets this itch for returning seasons after 50. We're doing the casting process for 50. I could see him being excited to bring back some of these people and do another returning season relatively soon afterwards. So again, I think we're in a world where, again, like 52, 54, again, I think those are still on the cards as being returning seasons, to where, again, in a similar way that we saw like with Cambodia, and immediately afterwards they did Game Changers, which had them also like reutilizing a lot of the people in the casting process for Cambodia. Again, I feel like a similar thing can happen here, and obviously I hope it happens because I do think there's a lot of people that could potentially bring back at this point. But beyond that, again, like family visits, I think will probably be a vote. I think auction will probably be a vote. Even though, again, all these are things that they obviously know what the result is going to be. Now, I know a big one that people are talking about is 26 days or 39 days. I personally would not expect that to be a vote. I think it would be really insane if it is. I do think logistically it doesn't really make sense for there to be a vote on that, because obviously they're going to need to know how many days they need to reserve these locations for well beforehand. Where again, filming for 50 is happening immediately after 48's finale. They're considering that fact, there's not much time left to prepare for the season. Through that, again, it just seems ridiculous to think that they would be able to switch it on a dime. I will say another thing about that, though, is again, I think they would know that the vote would go that direction. And through that, again, maybe there's a world it could be back to 39 days. But again, I think if it is, it'll be back to what I was saying beforehand, the fact that like they know where the vote's going. It's not really a choice made by the fans. They already made that decision for themselves earlier and are just now making it seem like the fans convinced them to do it. But so I would not personally bank on it. I do think it would be pretty surprising. Now, I'll also say don't really expect any casting related votes here, as again, it's not really implied throughout any of the press release, along with the fact that it doesn't seem like that's the direction that they're taking here, that they're going to do the Cambodia thing again, which I don't know why they're not doing it. Again, personally, I think that would be a really inspired idea here, considering the fact that they're already doing this. They're already doing a fan vote before 50 films, where again, my thing with the fan vote of why I didn't think there would be a vote for the cast is because there's no way that they would do a vote this early, because again, we know that Survivor 50 has to be Survivor 50, and through that, considering the filming schedule, they would have to do the vote before 49 airs, during the airing of 48, which is a very strange concept to do considering you still have 49 to go through. And again, we saw in Cambodia, again, they filmed Koh Rong first, but then aired Cambodia first because of that. Yet here, the big question for me would be, again, that'd be weird to do all this voting when there's still a season in between, but they're doing the voting anyway, to where, again, I think it's something that they probably should do in this position, though it's not something I'm expecting. I think at best, we're going to get like one vote for one specific person, but even then they'll point out that one person is like a person that like kind of sticks out, someone that obviously everyone just openly knows is in the running. And again, I think that's just kind of a weird thing to do, to where I think realistically, we're not looking at any casting related votes here, though it's a point where like I do question like, why aren't we doing this? Also, a choice that I am very much hoping is here is Final 2 or Final 3. And again, I've always been a big proponent for Final 2s or Final 3s. I think for me, and I'm going back to the forced fire making of it all, I would be fine with forced fire making if there was a Final 2. I think a big issue for me is the fact that forced fire making is literally the last round before the end of the game. So while I don't love the fact that it's guaranteed that someone goes out by a fire making challenge every round, at the end of the day, there's still social strategy aspects to that round where it's not the worst thing in the world for fire making to exist if there's a Final 2. And mind you, obviously, that obviously goes against why they like forced fire making to begin with, as again, they want forced fire making to be there to save the person that would typically go out at Final 3 or Final 4. But again, I think if there's a Final 2 on this season, I think it really rectifies a lot of the issues of modern Survivor. The issue with, again, a Final 3 and forced fire making now added on top of that is it adds a level of complacency to the players. Again, the players don't have to think about needing to go down the 2, needing to have a solid person that will take them to the end, and building connections with every single person as they need a person to actively choose to bring them. And I think that is an aspect of Survivor that is sorely missed in the modern day, where nowadays you can just get an alliance of 3 or 4 and ride that to the end. And obviously, again, there's still going to be people that would flip against that because of win equity. And we've gotten to the point where players play so dynamically that it's unlikely that they'll stick to each other till the end. But having a Final 3 and having forced fire making just incentivizes that even more, where I think we would be seeing even more fluid gameplay if there was a Final 2. So again, I would personally vote for a Final 2 to be back, but also I really just want there to be a vote on it. And again, calling back to this idea that the players themselves are not going to know what the results are. Again, while again, I personally would still expect a Final 3 to win over a Final 2, I do think the threat of there being a Final 2 does an effective enough job at what I wanted to do anyway. As again, if they are unsure at the fact that if there's a Final 2 or not, they're still going to have to play the game as if there is a Final 2, which has always been my big issue with Survivor US in the modern day, is the fact that obviously just everyone knows it's a Final 3. There's no doubt it'll be a Final 3, and through that shapes how you're going to play the game. Where, again, we see on like Australian Survivor or Survivor SA, there they switch back and forth at points, where again, you never really know. And through that, again, I think it adds a level of difficulty to the game that I would love to see translated to Survivor US. And I'm hoping the fact that the forced fire making was there, again, something that Jeff seems very strict on, and that being something he's willing to let go in this spot, I'm hoping Final 2s or Final 3s is also a similar case. But again, in general, I'm very excited for this twist. I think it's a very interesting idea. I think it's something that very much does celebrate 50 seasons of the show. I'll say I am pretty surprised at the fact that we are doing this. Where obviously I've had very shifting views over time on 50. I think in my initial videos, I talked about how I thought that they were going to do a lot of things for first time that they hadn't done in a new era. But then as time went on, I kind of shifted into the idea that I thought they were going to make this the culmination of the new era. That they were going to redo the new era, but just with returnees and probably obviously on a larger scale. But ultimately it would culminate in a very new era looking returnee season, only from the shifted up with 51. But now we're at the point where obviously it seems like it's more of the former, but really none of it's entirely true. They're really just seemingly doing whatever gets voted on. And I think that's, again, I was not expecting, though I think it's very exciting to see here. And I think it'll be interesting to see the effect that this has on seasons down the road, where while, again, this is a purely one season thing, this is purely affecting 50 itself, I do think the vote totals in this can affect future seasons. Again, if they see that people hate forced fire making, then I think Jeff will be at the point where he's like, oh, no one likes forced fire making. I guess we'll get rid of it. Same thing goes with any other basic format here, to where, again, I think this can shift Jeff's view on how people feel about twists, and through that can affect future seasons, even though really all this is obviously just a guarantee for this one specific season. But also I do want to talk about the idea that Jeff mentioned during the event that he wants to bring on people of all types and all eras. And again, I think that's a very exciting prospect, considering the fact that I know a lot of people were always worried that this was going to be an entirely new era season. I never thought that was the case, especially considering how much they really hammered home the fact that 50 is going to be a celebration of the series. Again, it's not a celebration of the new era, to where, again, I never expected this to be entirely new era season. To be fair, I believe Jeff confirmed that way back that was not going to be the case. But again, this obviously further confirms that. And again, I really love the idea that they are looking at people from all eras of the show. And again, based on rumors that are around, again, it seems like they're sticking true to that. And I think there's some very exciting names that are seemingly in the running for 50. Again, I do think we're looking at a world where I think only like half the cast is probably going to be new era at this point. You would think that they would reserve at least a couple spots for old school players, which again, we already know a few in the running. We know someone from the teens of Survivors in the running. I would expect them to be on. I haven't really heard much about people from the 20s, but we know a lot of people in the 30s are in the running. So again, I actually think at this point, it's probably not going to be as heavily influenced by recency bias as I was expecting. As again, I've talked about in the previous videos, I expected like at least 2/3 to be new era, a decent amount of people in the 30s, and maybe like a token person from old school Survivor, where the way that he's talking about it now, I do feel like we're actually looking more so at like a 50-50 split, which I think is a really interesting concept here. And also, I do want to talk about general thoughts on the overall like rumor mill that's going on right now, where obviously we're at the point now where the cast has not been finalized. It will be finalized next month. Jeff himself has confirmed the fact that they have narrowed it down to 50 people, likely cutting it down to 18 or 20. And again, names are floating around out there, and I think it's, again, a very exciting group of people. I think there are people that are in the running that I did not genuinely think would be in the running. And obviously, I just did my Survivor 50 guide to every player's returning chances video, and to be fair, a lot of that I still think is relatively accurate. Though the reality is, I actually made that video back in October. Again, I did edit it relatively recently, and I did update it for more recent information when I did that. But again, in that time, again, the 50 rumor mill has gone just kind of all over the place. Again, we've had so many different ideas of where 50 was going. There was a point where we thought it was going to be a second chance cast, which obviously, like, we now know it's not really going to be at this point. Though we're still at the point where no reliable source has said that there are winners in the running, which I do think is a bit weird, considering, again, I know Redman has said that he has heard about 30 names, none of them being winners, which, again, you would think that if there were winners in the running, that there would be winners involved in 30 out of the 50 names that were called. But again, you never know. Especially considering, like, again, it doesn't seem like they're doing anything to actively limit it based on theme, to where, because I would still look at like people like Marianne and Jam Jam as people that are definitely very possible for this season, even though, again, their names haven't really been out there from a reliable source. But again, it does seem like multi-time players are in the running. It does seem like really the casting pool beyond that is just, again, very open. Again, it seems like they are sticking true to the idea that they are casting people from all eras of the show. And again, it seems like they are putting genuine care into this cast. And we know that production had looked at like Mike's Bloom series of his like Survivor 50 wish list. And Jeff himself has said that they were looking at like fan casts, where again, I think it is very clear that production is putting a lot of care into this season. And again, I would say don't be surprised if some of these people that are on a lot of people's wish lists do end up being on the season, as they're clearly looking at that. Where again, I actually have a lot of faith here that we're going to be getting a pretty solid grouping of people. Again, will there be a WTF pick along the way? Probably. Again, it always happens. But again, I am expecting a pretty high caliber grouping of people here, and I think all the rumors kind of align with that potentially happening, even though again there's still some potential for some game changer worries. The Too Fair, again, we know for sure that Boston Rob said no, Parvati was not called. Again, I don't think they're looking at these like massive legends of the game for this season, or hopefully they're able to bounce out the cast well enough here. But there we go. I mean, those are kind of my update thoughts on Survivor 50. Again, the theme, current rumors. Now, again, down the road, once we obviously get a cast, which will be in a few months, again, I'll obviously do a cast reaction to that. And if we get a major update like this along the way, I'll potentially do some sort of video on it as well. Along with that, obviously, coverage of Survivor 50 when it happened. Now, in that time, obviously, again, we'll be covering Survivor 48. We got Australian Survivor going on. I mean, AU versus the World is going to be happening before 50 airs, which is kind of insane. Obviously, I got Traitors, Challenge Rivals, and so much stuff going on. So stay tuned for content on that. Also, next video that comes out should be my Dreamcast and Survivor 50 video, where, again, that was obviously made before all this recent news. So, obviously, again, don't expect there to be references to this. But, again, I think I still stick with that cast. That's still a cast that, again, I would ideally like to see come together, even though it is still obviously a Dreamcast. But, obviously, if you want to keep up with my opinions on this 50 rumor mill and, obviously, all the goings on of Survivor 48, you can follow me at Twitch at twitch.tv/MarinaReview, where I stream at 11 p.m. Eastern Time after every Survivor episode, and also Sundays. So, again, you can keep up with me there. But, anyway, those are my thoughts on the current status of Survivor 50. Thank you for watching.